Welcome. Welcome to my dungeon.
Welcome to Kuldrin's Krypt. I'm your host, Master Kuldrin. If you're new to the show, this is a place to dispel myths, get rid of stereotypes, and answer your questions about BDSM. You can call in at 865-268-4005 to leave your questions, or visit the Krypt at kuldrinskrypt.com. On this episode of the Krypt, it is all about effective communication, the do's, the don'ts, the suggestions, the recommendations. But before we get into that, I've got to say hello to my beautiful co-host, Funsize. Funsize, welcome back for another week.
Thank you, Master Kuldrin.
Also, a couple of people to thank. First off, the Accidental Trucker for his donation. If you are getting anything out of the show, you can go to kuldrinskrypt.com, the Support Us tab. That'll take you to a Patreon link where you can make a donation of $1 to $25 a month if you so choose. We really appreciate it. Also, Lily at bdsmcontracts.org. Funsize, I know you've had some experience with these contracts. How hard are they to put together?
Not really hard at all. bdsmcontracts.org does basically all the hard work for you. You just need to go through and pinpoint your own specifics for it. It's a really lovely service. I definitely recommend it.
Yeah, and they are beautiful. Printed, you can get softbound or hardbound. And if you use the coupon code Kuldrin20, you'll receive a 20% discount off of all purchases. And finally, as usual, those rules to love by. Number 1. Safe, sane, consensual, and informed. Number 2, KNKI, that's KNKI from the KNKI app, available on all platforms. That stands for knowledge, no intolerance, kindness, and integrity. And that quote by Paul Young, submission is not about authority, and it's not about obedience. It is all about relationships of love and respect. Now on to effective communication. Since working at a psychiatric facility and teaching both patients and staff members this particular tool, I'm going to take the lead on this. And there's a few things that I'd like to point out just from the start. The first one is that many people are actually too incapable, too insensitive, or too oversensitive to relate to others when it comes to communication skills, but this can be changed. It is a learnable tool that you can have. The second one, communication makes or breaks relationships. Quite simple. Number 3, communication is feelings put into words, and words can be delivered in a whole lot of different ways. So hopefully through this, we can learn a few ways on delivery and what to talk about and how to talk about it and what is important, not just from a BDSM aspect, but in everyday life as well. Number 4, communication is vital in life. Number 5, communication must be honest. Otherwise, it is not communication, it is storytelling time. And finally, be truthful in your opinions, ideas, thoughts, and actions. It is all part of the communication puzzle, but do not be vicious or closed off in these things. Be willing to talk about them, to discuss, to get into it. So that's a foundation for effective communication. Now, Funsize,
yes,
where would you like to go?
I think we should start with touching point on the communications that we've already talked about. Just as a refresher, that would be the basics of negotiation, safe words, and consent. We've talked about them at length, but I think it's important that we refresh.
Absolutely. So go ahead, and I'll not stand in your way since you've got a good start on that. Have at it.
Well, negotiations, I'll start there because I like to go in order the way I list things. They are how we take our wants and needs and we communicate them and negotiate them to find a compromise for all parties involved. That doesn't mean that one party is getting their way and the other party is losing. It means that you are finding a way that all your pieces can fit together. And it's really a beautiful thing when negotiations are communicated well. Safe words, we've talked about before, even quite recently, in which we have the verbal safe words that we need to communicate, and we also have our silent safe words we need to communicate. These are here for our safety and so that everyone's on the same page. And then finally, consent. Consent is a must-have in the lifestyle that we live because there are so many things that can go wrong, both physically and psychologically, that we need to be sure to communicate our consent openly, honestly, and clearly.
On consent, I have a hypothetical for you. Say
Yes, sir.
you're in the midst of a scene and there is something that you have negotiated as a limit of some sort, whether it's a hard limit, a soft limit, and you're in subspace and all of a sudden the person that you're playing with presents this, say it's about a particular toy, and presents this to you and asks if you consent to that. Now you're fully in subspace. Do you feel that that is okay to do, or that is something that people should avoid doing?
I feel like at that point, one or both parties needs to call orange, and you need to come down from subspace because it is an intoxicating experience. Just to be on the safe side for all parties involved, I think that you need to call orange and come down from subspace to be able to fully consent to those things.
Yeah. Now, for me, doing that kind of breaks the scene, and I feel that it's something that shouldn't be done personally, because no matter how much I may want to use a particular toy on somebody, if it's already been negotiated as a soft or a hard limit and it wasn't talked about before the scene, then to me, I think it's kind of wrong just to go ahead and bring it up. But that's why communication is so important. And I bring this up when it comes to the consent, because if you and I were to play and we had these limits defined, that would also be something that we could talk about beforehand is, okay, well, if something comes up in the moment, is it okay to bring it back down and discuss it then? Or do we just want to stick with our headspace and roll with it and then talk about it another time and then maybe incorporate it into another scene when we play again?
Well, that would be where our negotiations beforehand would come into play in this hypothetical situation.
Right. That was kind of my thought on it. Something that and I bring that up because that just took place with someone. So I was curious as to your thoughts on it. And I know if I have a curiosity, then it probably needs to be translated to the audience as well. What do we have going on next here? Disagreements, or are we still sticking with negotiation, safe words, and consent?
Let's move on to our disagreements.
Okay.
Talk. I think we've covered the basics as far as a refresher goes really well.
Okay, absolutely. So with disagreements, I've got a few barriers to handling those that I'd like to touch on. The first one is using global labels. Saying like, well, everybody or everyone is, you always do this. This always happens. Never, oh, I never get to do this. It's always you. Those are always bad things to do. Using sarcasm, dragging up the past, negative comparisons, being judgmental, making threats, non-constructive criticism. And in some cases, criticism at all, because when you're in a disagreement, that is not the time to throw out even a positive piece of criticism. Name calling, negators, things like, well, that's just stupid. If you're talking to somebody in a disagreement and they're just completely not interested and think that everything that you have to say is stupid, or they tell you, well, don't worry about it. Obviously, they are worried about it and they don't think that it's stupid. So don't negate what they're saying. Making accusatory statements or accusers, you don't really mean that type of thing. Directives, well, you should do it this way. You're giving them a direct order, basically. It needs to be this way. Disagreements are no time to tell somebody what to do. You need to be focused on the I statements. Cliches, everything will be okay. Don't worry about it. We'll get through it. You may feel that way, but that's not always the best thing to say. And then finally, value judging. Don't question someone else's opinion or the level of value that they're placing on whatever particular issue the disagreement is about. And with that said, respect is absolutely a must, along with trust. Now, in what we do, obviously trust is a very important thing. If someone has a limit, whether you agree with it or not, it's important to respect that. And you can disagree with a sub and still be respectful, or as a sub. Either way, respect for me as a dominant is very important because I lead by example. Just because I may feel like barking an order, that is not necessarily the thing to always do, especially in a time of disagreement, because people often forget, especially newbies, that yeah, it's BDSM, but it's also a relationship with real people, real emotions, and real feelings. And then finally, take time to calm down. Discuss the disagreement with a clear head. Don't just be eager to, I have to fix it. I got to fix it now. I got to fix it now. And you end up cornering somebody, especially if they're like me. I need time to relax. Give me 20 minutes, leave me alone, and then we might come back. It may take longer. If you want to check in with me after 20, 30 minutes and say, hey, are you ready to talk about that? Then I'll give a clear answer and we can move on from there. And sometimes it might take a couple of days. One of the biggest mistakes that modern Hollywood has bestowed upon us when it comes to our relationships and disagreements is that you can't go to bed angry. And that's such crap. There's nothing wrong with that because some problems are just too big to handle in one evening, and you're going to have to. But the thing is remaining respectful during that time period. You may be madder at somebody than you've ever been in your life. Doesn't mean that you can't maintain a level of respect. Funsize, disagreements. What do you feel about it?
I have to agree, especially on the time away from each other. I know that in both my BDSM relationships and in my marriage, the healthiest thing to do when I'm having a disagreement with someone, no matter how we feel about it, no matter how big or small the issue is to take time. That could be 5 minutes. It could be 10 seconds of counting to 10 and taking deep breaths. Or it could be even, like you said, overnight where you're just sleeping it off so that you can come back to it with a clear and rational head. Because the truth is, you're having a relationship with someone you care about. You don't want to hurt them.
Yeah.
So you want to be able to approach whatever the problem is rationally, logically, and be able to say what is necessary and not hurtful.
Yeah. People want to think that it's a fine line there, but it's not. It's all on intent. If your intention is to make yourself look good or to hurt the other person, obviously that's the wrong intentions. If your intent is to actually nurture the relationship and take this disagreement and turn it into a learning experience in the relationship. But I tell you, some of the reasons that people struggle with this is being able to tap into their feelings due to fears. They may have a fear of losing control, so they just don't want to talk about it. Losing approval. And I find that to be very common within the submissive world. Well, I can't bring this up because daddy won't approve of it or, master won't approve of it. Just misunderstanding. And they don't want to touch on it. There's just that fear of being misunderstood, really, especially if that has been a common thread within the relationship. And that's often the case in a new relationship, is just misunderstanding. I know with my wife and I, we had constant misunderstandings the first 6 months that we were together. In fact, we'll both joke, and it's been 16 years now. I don't know why I stayed with you for those first 6 months. We never should have stayed together because everything seemed to be a misunderstanding. And now it's just something that we can look back on fondly and kind of laugh about. And we've only been in maybe 3 actual arguments since then. Everything else, we sit down and we talk it out. And even in those 3 arguments, it was a time where we could just kind of, the heat of it hit us. And we had our little blow up at each other that lasted a few minutes. And then one of us would realize, oh God, we're being ridiculously immature and stupid about this. Let's go to our corners and come out talking, not come out swinging. And then finally, the lack of trust. And quite honestly, for me personally, how I have built the most trust in any relationship that I've ever had, vanilla, kinky, friends, business, it was through misunderstandings and disagreements and how we came back to the table and dealt with these issues. That's where the trust was really built. So disagreements, in my opinion, are actually one of the best things that can take place in any type of relationship. What do you think about that?
I have to agree with that. I think disagreements are healthy. The simple fact is, no people, no matter what the group is, no matter what the dynamic, are going to agree all the time. It's not actually healthy to agree all the time. You can build a lot upon a disagreement because you're giving each other ideas. You're giving each other feelings. You're really building upon the base of something that's already started. And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I know. I've said it several times here on the podcast. I need a strong submissive. And that's one of the reasons why, is because I don't want somebody I've had property before. And it was tons of fun. It was a good relationship. It was a healthy relationship, and it ended well. But at the same time, the enjoyment that I get from having a strong submissive as opposed to a piece of property as a submissive was just so much greater. It's so much more satisfying because I love to learn about people, and I don't want somebody just to say yes to me all the time. You know, I that just irritates me.
So as you said, with the property and there being a lack of communication there, I also want to add that even if the submissive isn't property, dominant needs to be sure to keep the line of communication open, in the sense that you need to be able to have your sub feel like they can approach you to communicate their needs. That means that you have to be receptive. If your sub says, for example, Master, can we talk about this? You need to be receptive of that. And even if that means that you have to say, I'm busy, I'm sorry, can we talk about this in an hour? That's fine, because you have given them a time and a way that they can still communicate what they're trying to get across. And I feel like that's very important.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people sometimes forget about those things.
Yeah, that's, but you cannot talk about communication without talking about doing those check-ins. And my style is, of course, the set weekly check-ins, a specific time that never changes. That is always going to happen at that time. And I always let my submissives lead the check-in, because I found that if I lead it, then they will eventually, no matter how strong they may start out, they will eventually, in each individual check-in, start showing that submissive trait. So I make sure that I give them the reins and I sit back and pretty much just chill until it's time for me to answer something or respond to something. And then after their concerns are hammered out, basically, then if I have any concerns, then I will present those. But as someone who is a very, very strong dominant, I just cannot take the lead in a check-in, because it won't be a proper check-in if I do that.
With my own submissive, we actually have daily check-ins. And along with that, I have pointed out to him that anytime he needs me for anything, it might be a little while before I get a chance to respond, but I will respond that day to make sure that his wants and needs are respected.
Very good.
So I feel like that's important.
Yeah. And I would imagine that was something that was negotiated from the beginning about check-ins, or is that just your style?
Absolutely. It's something we negotiated, but it is something that is part of my style. Usually I don't have daily check-ins, but I feel like because our relationship is online and we do have this distance between us, it's important that we keep in touch with each other so that we feel closer.
Yeah. I agree. I think that's a good way to do that. Not that I have the experience in that. As we've discussed in previous episodes and off the mic.
Tons and tons of discussion on it.
What about getting into just normal conversation? There again, you may actually be in the kinky side of a DS relationship for a very small percentage of the relationship. So how about addressing just normal conversations?
I would say that normal conversations are vital. They're great for building your trust, communication, connection through shared interest or even slight disagreements. One of you might like a certain type of book and one might like another type of book, and you can have little disagreements about that. And it's actually really healthy because then you learn about each other, which builds trust. So I feel like it's vital.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, it's got to be there. Because you cannot I can't say you can't, but for me personally, it's not as enjoyable, even with a master-slave dynamic, to have someone in role 24/7.
I feel like even if you're in a MS relationship, and this is from my experience on this, my master and I might have spent 3 or 4 hours in the span of a week on the kinky side of things. The rest of the time we were just us.
Yeah. Curled up, watching a movie, stuff like that.
Curled up, watching movies, working, going to the grocery store, doing the laundry, everyday people things, because we were still everyday people too. And I feel like most relationships are like that. It's a very rare one where a submissive has consented to be property, as you brought up before, where that's sometimes neglected. And I don't mean neglected in a bad way. It's just neglected because that was what they negotiated and agreed upon.
Yeah. One of the other things that is very important to talk about in this communication, and you brought up something with online now, when you have check-ins, is it over the phone? Is it through text? Is it through like video chat? How do you do that?
Honestly, most of our communication comes through Yahoo Messenger so that we can communicate easily because he lives in a different country. Makes calling and texting kind of iffy and kind of expensive if we were to do that. So we've found this way to be an instant way to communicate easily and openly.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is the basic breakdown for communication. You've got body language is 50%, tone of voice is 40%, and your words actually only make up 10% of communication. So it's not what you say, it truly is how you say it. Now, on the phone, obviously that's going to change because it takes that 50% out that is body language, and it actually becomes 83% your tone and 17% what you have to say, your actual words. So that kind of rolls us into silent communication with hand signals, body language, and as you put in our show notes, the very telling eyes.
Yes, the eyes are very, very telling. Did you know that if a person's eyes tick to the left in the middle of speaking, it's considered to be a tell for a lie? Mm-hmm. Smallest little tick can give a person away for dishonesty. So that's very important. You can also see emotion conveyed in people's eyes. If their eyes are misting up, they're either very happy or very upset about something. The way the pupils dilate with attraction, which is very important to me personally. There's just 1,000 different things that you can get from a person's eyes.
Oh, there's it's called micro expressions.
Yes.
That you pick up on people. And Tim Roth was in a TV series from 2009 to 2011 called Lie to Me that was based on that, and that I had studied in psychology, that I found quite interesting. What you were talking about, looking off to the right or off to the left, and it's up and to the right and up and to the left. One way you are accessing actual memories, and the other way you are accessing the creative side of your brain to come up with a story to tell, also known as formulating a lie. So these micro expressions for this silent communication or just that body language is absolutely something that's very important. And that also kind of comes into play with me and my personal choice not to do online relationships, because I read people very well by their body language, especially if it's somebody who refuses to Skype or whatever. And I'm not talking about fun, happy time Skyping to keep it PG-13, but just some kind of video call for communication. Then it's hard for me to build that connection.
I would also like to talk about the body language that comes into play with keeping open communication. And what I mean by this is if you are having a conversation with someone and you've got your phone in your hands and you're looking at your phone, you're not paying them attention, you're not giving them respect. And then there's things like you'll be having a disagreement and you might want to cross your arms over your chest or something. That's a physical way to close yourself off from the communication. And it's really important when you're trying to have effective communication not to do that, to keep your arms out to the side, to face the person, not be at an angle, and to make good eye contact when you can. Even as submissives, we do need to be able to give respect to our dominant and give them our full attention when we're having these discussions. It's kind of tricky to give eye contact during those times, but at the same time, it's very important to because it shows your respect and your attention.
Yeah, that is very, very important. Now, that is also a cultural thing, though. You know, in our country, in the United States, you're looking at a bubble of 3.5 to 5 feet of personal space that people like to keep around them. And what you said about facing them or standing to the side, for me, if someone stands like square up to me because of things that I used to do when I was a very angry teenager and the amount of fighting that I used to participate in, if someone squares up to me, then that is absolutely a sign of aggression. So if I'm talking to somebody, regardless of the situation, I will often turn kind of a little sideways to them. I make sure that one foot is in front of the other, and not in a, what I consider to be an aggressive stance. And some people will consider that disrespectful. So I have to make sure as part of effective communication to tell them, hey, this is, I'm positioned this way, because people have become angry with me and say, you know, why do you stand this way? why won't you just face me directly and talk to me? And I tell them, because if I stand a certain way, then to me that is an act of aggression. So in me taking this particular stance, it is actually a sign of respect and showing you that I'm more open to what you have to say. So it's cultural, it's learned behavior. There are a lot of things that go into it, but as long as you are communicating these things with others, then you're doing the right thing, in my opinion, as long as you're doing it with respect. So we've already talked about so much in a short amount of time. Moving into, I always like to start things off with a definition, but this time I think we're kind of hitting the definition of it a little bit last, or toward the end. Communication is both a skill and a tool. Run with that.
I would say that it's both a skill and a tool, which requires constant work that can make your relationships 1,000 times better, regardless of what the relationship is. It's something that you have to cultivate in your life basically every day. There's really no way that you can cut yourself off from communicating the things that are necessary and the things that you feel are necessary. And it really can break or end a relationship if the lines of communication are broken or severely flawed. So if you want the relationship to last, you're going to work at it.
Yeah. And like you said before, as a dom, making sure that line of communication stays open and that the submissive, slave, whatever their particular role or title might be, they know that they can come talk to you about anything.
Yes, I'm going to share a very personal note today. I recently, just 2 weeks ago, left my dominant submissive relationship in which my dominant and I had stopped effectively communicating. And it's a very painful thing when that happens. So we're not talking hypothetical, if you don't work on this, it will end. We're talking very real experiences that I know both you and I have had in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. It is something that if you don't nurture it, if you don't take care of it, it certainly has the potential to not just end the relationship, but to destroy people for hopefully what is only a short period of time. But I know the last one that I was involved with that ended in such a traumatic way, really did some damage. And it's taken some time to, so to speak, get back up on the horse when it comes to that. So it's not just an example of effective communication, but also relationships of love and respect. And this was a slave that I'm referring to, not just a submissive, but into that absolute highest level of relationship, not to demean a DS relationship at all, because that's also very, very intense, as well. A sub always speaks with respect. Now, that's something that you've got down in the show notes, and
I actually have it down in the show notes a couple times.
Yeah.
Just because I feel like it's very important.
And I think that equally it is, even more so important that a dom speaks with respect, because we do have to lead by example. I've said that a couple times already just in this episode, but why would I expect my submissive to respect me if I'm not showing them respect when it comes to this effective communication? So, you can't just bark a bunch of orders and think that because you call yourself a dominant or a master that you deserve it. No, it must be earned. Absolutely must be earned.
Did you have anything else to add from the classes that you used to teach?
Well, I was actually flipping through my workbook that I'd put together for those classes. Yes, actually I do. There's just a couple more points that I want to make real quick. Enhancing your communication skills. Prepare yourself, make sure others are ready, be positive, be direct, own your message, ask for feedback, use I messages. This makes you responsible for your ideas, your feelings, and your wishes. Avoid you messages. Be specific and clear about what you think, feel, and want. Use active listening, concern, silence, and encouragement. Stay focused and calm. Be reflective. Restate what you're hearing. Be aware of nonverbal communication and make sure to thank your partner for talking to you. And that is one of the things that just sounds ridiculously cheesy to me, I guess, to go back to a 90s phrase, but it really means a lot. Anytime somebody has actually taken the time to say, thank you for speaking with me about this, it means a lot and it makes me more open. And quite often, if it comes at the beginning and at the end of the conversation, and that does go both ways, because that is showing not just respect, but showing that somebody wants to make it work, wants to build it stronger and let it be a more valuable, nurtured relationship. And yes?
I was just going to add that I actually recently found a statistic that said that marriages in which couples thank each other and show their appreciation often, more than 1 or 2 times per day, actually, are the longest lasting and the strongest relationships.
Certainly makes sense.
It does. I know I try to thank my husband for everything that he does for me because it is so incredible, and he does the same. And I'm sure you and your wife are very similar in that note, just because you've been together, and I know the two of you are very happy.
Yes. Yeah, that statistic is not at all surprising. It comes down to a common sense thing. If you can be mature about things and talk about them, then chances are if the outcome is not exactly what you were hoping for to begin with, it's still going to be a positive outcome because you've reached an agreement together. Therefore, the relationship is just that much stronger. The last thing that I really want to touch on, and I've kind of ran through these earlier pretty quickly, but some of the most common problems to think about. So as I read through these, kind of consider if any of these would apply to you or not. Setting limits and saying no. Making direct requests. Most people have a very difficult time asking for what they want. Whether it's submissive or dominant, doesn't matter. That's just a human issue. Stating ideas and feelings without being asked. Some people don't have a problem with that at all and go way overboard. Other people just can't do it. Telling others positive things about yourself. Funsize, what is one positive thing about you?
I am very understanding.
Yes, you are. And thank you for sharing that with me.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking me. Would you mind sharing one about yourself too?
I really, really enjoy helping other people. It is what keeps me going every day.
Well, thank you both for that and for sharing it.
Certainly. And thank you for asking. Giving positive feedback, giving negative feedback in a productive manner, and just asking for feedback can often be very difficult, and it can be very difficult when someone asks you for feedback. So, Funsize, what could I do better as the host of this show?
I think you definitely hit on the difficult part there.
I can absolutely tell, and I will relieve you from that question at this point. It's one of those things. It's easy for me to ask, and it's actually easy for me to get that feedback. I think several listeners in a previous episode that have contacted me via FetLife, email, the Facebook group, and one of the things was that I always ask in my response to someone is, what can we do better to make this show better for you? So do not be afraid to send me that feedback. I know I may be opening up a big, massive can of worms by saying that, but I really do mean it. We're approaching 10,000 downloads. We have it's over 300 subscribers that get automatic downloads for every episode. So we're still young. We're only in the 20s right now as far as episode numbers, but we are so grateful for each and every single listener and every piece of feedback that comes in, with the exception of one that I have to bring up right now as far as communication goes and contacting us. Please do not contact Funsize for playtime. We do appreciate the offers. However, there is a vetting process that goes on. And if you want to start with maybe getting to know each other first and not just saying, hey, I'm flying into your town next week and I would love some playtime with you. That's a little bit insulting to both of us. And it's wildly inappropriate. Anybody that has listened to our podcast should already be well aware that we go through a major vetting process, just as you should, before you play with anybody. And personally, a week is really quick to vet somebody. So any words on that one?
I think you covered that one really well, actually.
Oh, well, on that note, if you don't have anything else, I think I have pretty much said everything that I wanted to get out on this particular topic. I hope we do get some feedback on this and other episodes, except for the first two, because I know those are terrible to listen to.
They are not.
All right. Next week on the Krypt, Funsize, what do we have going on?
We are actually going to be jumping right into negotiations.
Oh, one of my absolute favorite things. I think you and because I know it's one of your favorite things too. So I would imagine we're probably going to battle back and forth a little bit on who's going to jump on the lead on that one.
We will have to negotiate that, sir.
Oh, as with everything. All right. So in the meantime, visit kuldrinskrypt.com to find out how to subscribe to the show, how to make donations. And I did get a donation. She does wish to remain anonymous, but I would just like to say I know who you are and I'm very grateful. This has been Master Kuldrin and Funsize for kuldrinskrypt.com. Unearth the truth.